Welcome to Around the Empire. I'm your host, Joanne Leon. Around the Empire podcast is listener-supported independent media. Pitch in if you can, patreon.com/aroundtheempire, paypal.me/aroundtheempirepod. Also, please like, share, and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Tom Luongo joins us today. We talk about the factional wars going on among the powers that be, the Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein case, the Southern District of New York, SDNY, Federal Prosecutor's Office, and Brexit, meaning the larger battle between the EU and the US and UK. We attempt to analyze how these things are related and could provide a higher level of understanding on some of the scandals and the chaos that we've been witnessing in the run-up to the 2020 election and Brexit, and the chaos that has escalated to more extreme and public levels since the 2016 election. Tom Luongo is an analyst, a writer, and a former research chemist. His specialty is markets analysis informed by geopolitics. He's a libertarian and an Austrian economist, publishes a blog, Gold, Goats, and Guns, and a monthly investment letter. He contributes at Newsmax Media, and he's published by and does commentary for many other media outlets. Just a note, Tom and I are very different politically, but we believe in finding common ground, especially on war and foreign policy, and also on some other very basic things. No doubt his listeners will be aggravated with me, mine with him to some extent, but common ground's more important than ever. And I want to provide a variety of voices on this podcast. We already have too many echo chambers and hyper-partisanship, in my view, which are doing more harm than good. Another note, I have to apologize for the audio quality in this interview. I think we both had some internet issues that caused some big audio issues, which I fixed as best I could. We had to stop and start a couple times. I edited some of the worst problems, and hopefully it's fairly easy to listen to now despite the problems. We recorded this on July 8th, 2020. Tom Luongo's here talking to us from Florida. Hello, Tom. Thanks for coming back on the show. Great to talk with you.
Oh, good morning, Joanne. How are you? It's been a long time, so really appreciate the invite.
It has. We've been meaning to do this for, I don't know, forever. I don't know why we didn't, but here we are. So that's the important thing.
Yep.
Today, we're going to talk about factional wars and two aspects of it, the Ghislaine Maxwell case and Brexit, which Tom has brought some interesting thoughts and ideas to, which I hadn't really considered Brexit as a big factor in this. So, but both of us are very interested in the factional war that we have seen going on. So, and we're going to approach this from the perspective of factions. I mean, there are factional wars. There are always factional wars, but man, have they come out in the open during the past 4 years. You have an article titled Ghislaine Maxwell. Oh, sorry, it's not. I think it's pronounced Ghislaine.
It is Ghislaine.
Now it's Ghislaine.
Yes.
All right. I lost track of what the title. What's the title of that one?
Ghislaine Maxwell did not commit suicide by getting arrested.
Oh yes, of course. That's right. Clever. And in that you say, Jeffrey Epstein's partner in crime is now in U.S. custody in the darkest of all places, the Southern District of New York, SDNY. The first thing on everyone's mind should be, which faction actually has her, and how long will she survive? And I guess that maybe the day after the arrest, Tom and I were DMing each other, and that's exactly what we both first said. All right, which one got her? You know. Yep. Who's behind? Because there are a lot of ways this thing could be interpreted. Now, yep. before we take off on that note, let me just lay out some of the details of this case, because I think that most people who listen to this podcast and your listeners are pretty familiar with the case, but maybe not the history, and if they're not, I just want to make sure they have enough information to understand what it is we're talking about. So I have a little timeline here. And so Ghislaine Maxwell, she's 58 years old. She's the youngest of 9 children of Robert Maxwell. He's a whole nother story that could be like 3 podcast episodes. She was born in France. She moved to the U.S. in 91, and she holds three citizenships that we know of: British, American, and U.S. And I know I'd be surprised if she didn't have Israeli citizenship as well.
Mm-hmm.
She's considered to be British American. She has, or at least had, residences in Belgravia, a very exclusive area in London, and in Manhattan. She almost certainly worked for Israeli intelligence, like her father, if not some other intelligence agencies. And I would suggest that maybe, um, maybe intelligence agencies. Maybe that's kind of not what we're working with here. We might be looking at more of like a conglomerate of intelligence agencies in multiple countries, but I'm not sure. She's been hiding since late 2019. She's reportedly been under investigation by the FBI, communicating only through lawyers. And so going back a little bit, in 2008, the Epstein case in Florida with FBI involvement after request by the Palm Beach, Florida chief of police, Epstein was arrested and convicted for a year, served for a little more than a year, sort of, in a very odd sweetheart deal. And the Palm Beach County state prosecutor had convened a grand jury, but only brought in a few victims, charged him with only one felony charge, and he pleaded not guilty to that. There were at least 36 girls involved in that investigation, some as young as 14. Alan Dershowitz and Ken Starr were on his legal defense team, and all that started back in 2005, I guess. Then in 2006, the FBI had their own investigation, Operation Leap Year. There was a 2007 indictment, and Alexander Acosta, the U.S. Attorney for Southern District of Florida at the time, later Trump's Secretary of Labor, he accepted a plea deal that Dershowitz had helped negotiate. And the Acosta plea deal granted immunity from all federal criminal charges to Epstein, along with 4 named co-conspirators and any unnamed potential co-conspirators, which is just totally bizarre. But Ghislaine Maxwell is one of those, and that's a factor in all of this, possibly, anyway, if that immunity holds up or not. At the time, that halted the investigation, sealed the indictment, and all the details were kept from the victims, which is against the law. And Acosta, then he was, proposed for Trump's Secretary of Labor position. And reportedly, he told the Trump transition team, Vicky Ward in the Daily Beast in July 2019 said that Acosta had told the Trump transition team that Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence and that this was, quote, above his pay grade and to leave it. He was told to leave it alone. And then Acosta was asked about that. I'll just throw this in. It just last year when all this blew up, he was in a press conference. He was asked about it. He said he did the best he could with the case. And when asked about the intelligence thing, he dodged. And this is exactly what he said. He said, so there's been reporting to that effect. And let me say, there's been reporting to a lot of effects in this case, not just now, but over the years. And again, I would be hesitant to take this reporting as a fact. This was a case that was brought by our office. It was brought based on the facts. And I look at the reporting and others, and I can't address it directly because of our guidelines. But I can tell you that a lot of reporting is going down the rabbit holes. Okay, so, and I remember at the time when you watch him say this, he's absolutely dodging it and not denying it, that it was, as he had told the Trump transition team, that, intelligence got involved, told him to let Epstein off, basically, with as little as he could, and to just leave it alone. Okay, so that's the 2008 case, which is important. There are also numerous civil cases. I can't get into the details on those, but there's one particularly very tangled sort of defamation suit that's been in the New York court involving Virginia Giuffre Roberts, an Epstein victim, and Alan Dershowitz gotten involved in that, and some others. And it's it's being handled by a judge, a very well-known judge in New York. It's been a long dispute over the sealed documents and the release of those. And that has just come up again recently. There are a bunch of other lawsuits we're not going to get into. And I think everybody knows that Ghislaine Maxwell was Epstein's lover, his partner, probably more than partner. She procured and prepped the young girls. She had deep connections to the British royal family, especially Prince Andrew. She's a friend of the Clintons. There are photos of her at a prime spot in Chelsea Clinton's wedding, although supposedly she was the guest of someone else, was there as the guest of someone else. She's called a socialite by the media because she's so well connected with powerful people around the world, but it's also a major like euphemism for people trying to protect her and play down what she actually did and her powerful friends. And to bring this up to the recent case last summer with Epstein, he was arrested in July, and he allegedly died by hanging in the Metro Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan on August 10th, 2019. Nobody believes it. Epstein's properties were raided by the FBI, but that was done slowly, which was also strange, that they didn't go right in there. And now to the Ghislaine Maxwell case that just last week started. So July 2nd, Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested by the FBI and by NYPD detectives. I didn't know that NYPD was involved. She was at an estate in the middle of nowhere in Bradford, New Hampshire. And she had bought this, big house for $1 million in cash. She used an LLC to shield the ownership. She was charged with 6 federal crimes, including the enticement of minors, sex trafficking, and perjury. They moved her, I guess she initially went to the local jail, and then she was moved to Brooklyn jail. And now there's a hearing set for July 14th at 1 p.m. by video link for arraignment and bail hearing. And this is an SDNY court in New York. The judge, Allison Nathan, I don't know anything about her yet, and she'll be present with 1 prosecutor and 1 defense attorney. Video link in from the jail in Brooklyn. Quote, public access to the gallery limited. Let's approach from the perspective of factions. And here's that quote from Tom's article again. Mm-hmm. Quote, Jeffrey Epstein's partner in crime is now in U.S. custody in the darkest of places, the Southern District of New York, SDNY. The first thing on everyone's mind, which faction actually has her and how long will she survive, unquote. So Tom, let's try this. What are your thoughts on what the factions are and who is driving this thing?
It's a good question as to what the factions are, but I think the basic question everybody should be asking is Donald Trump complicit in all of this, or is he driving this thing forward? And right. I think a lot of people want to believe, because of pictures and the guilt by association thing that I think the mainstream media and others have played, is that, and there's the history between Bill Barr and his dad giving Jeffrey Epstein his original job and all this stuff. And I hear all this stuff all the time, but my basic premise here, point number 1, and I covered this in my podcast the other day, which is, if Trump was actually guilty of anything at all vis-a-vis Epstein, other than showing up at a party and getting his picture taken for page 3 of the New York Post, he would already be out of office. They would have used all of this last year during the impeachment to to invoke everybody's disgust circuit and get Trump gone. There isn't anything, there's no there. And I think that what's happening here is that, and then you have to ask yourself the question about Bill Barr, because Barr is as deep state as they come. He's widely considered to be the Bush family's consigliere. I mean, right. But that's, I think, the big question that you have to, he's the big question mark. Well, here's the next question for you. Just like Trump would be out of office if he was guilty at Pedo Island, well, he would also be out of office if Bill Barr didn't save his bacon last year by defining obstruction of justice in such a way that it undercut Andrew Weissman and Bob Mueller within the Russiagate investigation. The minute Barr became Attorney General and made explicit and legal his interpretation of the statute, the obstruction of justice statute, which he sent a letter to Weissman about before he became Attorney General back in July of 2018. Remember, he got involved then at Trump's request. So why would Barr come out of retirement if he wants to see Donald Trump go down? Or, I mean, none of that makes any sense. So if he wanted, if he was part of the faction that is trying to memory hole Epstein, then he would have never come out of retirement in the first place, because no one would have ever done anything vis-a-vis Epstein. Because without Barr as his attorney general, Trump doesn't go after Epstein, period. So there's something about this. And I think that the faction here is that it's Trump and Barr continuing to push the pawn forward in this chess game. Barr and Clan Trump and Clan Barr have made a deal with Clan Bush that they'll keep Papa Bush out of all the, they'll keep all of his secrets as safe as possible, and behind the redacted doors for as long as possible, and that they're going to go after the Democrats on this. They're going to go after the people who I think are trying to scuttle Brexit, destroy the royal family, or at least marginalize the royal family and make them and put them back into a marginal state in UK politics, and going after the European Union at the same time. And that's going to take some explaining. So,
yeah, that's the aspect to it that I had not figured into it. I see Barr as a fixer.
Sure.
And as I think his goals are to not let any of this spin out of control, because it could easily, if they all start spilling on each other, it takes down people on both sides, if you will, multiple, however many sides there are. And also Barr doesn't want to lose any of the authorities that the current DOJ and the various agencies have. And he has stated that, I actually believe when he says things like that, he doesn't want the public to become outraged, to figure out, all the things that these people have been doing, and force Congress to revoke a lot of their authorities. So I think those are his two goals. But, the Berman thing is the thing that confuses me. I don't think the SDNY is on Trump's side at all.
No.
And this is that, they've done numerous things, not just this case, but Manafort and Cohen, and they've done many things to hem Trump in, which is another thing that, if you will, the deep state, the national, I don't even know what you call the thing.
Call it the
but
Davos
it's
crowd.
More than just,
and it's
it
more really
than just
is
bureaucracy.
Yeah. So the way this lays out, you have to realize that Epstein is at the center of the rape of Russia. He's at the center of Bill Browder's rise, and Edmund Safra, and all of that stuff that goes back to the 1990s. Like, this is all part of all of that stuff. It's part of Ukraine. It's part of Serbia and Kosovo and the Clintons and their crimes there, and the human trafficking that comes out of that place. Remember, I get all of my regulars on my live stream. They're Serbian, who remind me of all this stuff all the time. And I only barely scratched the surface of my understanding of the whole Serbia-Kosovo thing. But notice how Trump got himself involved in that recently. And the EU had to come in and indict the Serbian president, the Kosovo president, to keep him from meeting with the Serbian president and Trump Richard Grenell at Camp David. That was going to happen, and then all of a sudden, at the last moment, Merkel intervenes and scuttles that thing. This is a big deal. So let's kind of set the big picture here. The big picture is that Donald Trump is under an absolute insurrection against his government and against the American government. There is a concerted effort here through the over application of social control under vis-a-vis COVID-19, the incipient financial crisis that was already happening regardless of COVID-19. This was all already happening in March. All of this has been designed to create maximal pressure to try and create a revulsion against Trump, so that we'd even elect, demented Joe Biden, right? Who's, campaigning from his gimp cellar. This is how crazy American politics is right now. He's not campaigning at all. He's locked in his gimp cellar with a freaking mask on. There's not going to be an actual, there's not going to be any debates or any of this stuff. There's not going to be a real political season. We're just hoping that they're just hoping they can create enough of a firestorm on social media and push enough voters over the line to keep Trump from getting elected. Because the goal here has been stated quite clearly by George Soros and others, that the goal is the destruction of the United States as the arbiter of Western values, and that is to be shifted over to the European Union. This is very clear when you look at the World Economic Forum, when you listen to these people at Davos, when you listen to the Bilderberg Group or any of these other people. But these people have said this stuff. Jean-Claude Juncker said there can be no democratic disagreement to the European treaties, effectively. Like, there can be no democratic movement against the European treaties. This is the man who used to run the European Commission, right? The European Union is being set up as an unelected technocratic oligarchy with a full-on Politburo that exists as a transnational system with interlocking treaties and interlocking trade deals that will be international treaties, things like TTIP, TPP, and the rest of them. Were all designed, and the Paris Accords are all designed to remove the ability of sovereign nations and sovereign governments from being able to intervene and remove their courts from being able to arbitrate on law, right? So the only way that happens is if you get rid of the United States. And Trump is the guy who understands that this is the process, which is why the first thing he did when he got into office was kill the TPP, kill the TTIP, which is why they hate him, by the way, and the Paris Accords. All three of those things, if Trump does nothing else for the rest of his presidency, he was a success on that level because it slowed down and forced the European Union onto its back foot. And he's also supported Brexit all the way down the line. And he supported Boris Johnson's ascension to the prime ministership. Now, Johnson is an interesting figure, a guy I don't trust in any way, manner, shape, or form, but I've had to grudgingly admit that I was wrong about what his intentions were as prime minister. I would much prefer Nigel Farage to be prime minister of Britain handling these things, but Nigel would have already been shot and killed had that actually happened. So Johnson and Trump are the symbols of populism's revolt against the European Union. They've already neutralized Matteo Salvini in Italy, at least for now. They're attacking Viktor Orban in Hungary, but he doesn't have any power, right? They've neutralized Vox in Spain. They've neutralized Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. And they've neutralized Alternative for Germany with this COVID-19 thing in Germany. Merkel is now in control again. Emmanuel Macron continues to exist in France, even though his approval rating is, less than our Congress's. All of that does not matter to these people. They control the media. They control all of it. So now, understanding that when Trump went to England this time last year, to meet with the Queen during the ascension of Johnson as during the Tory leadership ballot, right, where Johnson won to become prime minister after Theresa May resigned. That was fought tooth and nail to the point of trying to block an American president from visiting England and meeting with the Queen. This is unprecedented in history that this would even think to occur. And they showed no shame whatsoever in trying to stop Donald Trump from meeting with the Queen. We're political allies. We have treaties together. This is insane, right? But this was the opposition to this. So that's your first clue that there's something serious here. Every time Trump goes to meet with somebody he's not supposed to meet with, there is histrionics to the level of, oh my God, he's the next Hitler. Oh my God, he's a traitor. Like, really? Where does this come from? Like, anybody not believing, thinking that any of these things about Trump should be asking yourself, why are they acting so ridiculous? Of course Trump should meet the Queen when he goes to England. It's a state visit. This is just part and parcel of diplomacy. But I guess he's not president, right? He meets with the Queen. Johnson, he, and the Queen, I'm convinced, hatched a plot to take back control of the British government from the civil service and the intelligence community that actually has been running the British government for years. And the key figure in this is former I love to say former Chief Cabinet Secretary and former National Security Director, Sir Mark Sedwill. Now, I spoke with Alexander Mercouris of the Duran for 2 hours the other day, and I've got the link, and it's on my blog. That talk is very important because Mercouris confirms all the things that I'm about to say. And being a Brit and being a British lawyer, I'm going to take him as a far more what's the word I'm looking for?
Credible source.
Credible source than I am, right? I'm just some guy in Florida putting pieces together. So here's the gig. Sedwill was the most powerful man in Britain, far more powerful than the prime minister, the chief cabinet secretary. The chief cabinet secretary. They made the Brits. The BBC ran a sitcom called Yes Minister, which is effectively made that point for years. The Brits used to laugh at it, that the chief cabinet secretary actually ran the government, not the prime minister. And then Theresa,
is that like the chief of staff here?
It's more than that. It's actually a constitutional office, and he's in charge of both. He's in charge of the civil service. And then Theresa May made him national security director and merged those two offices, which then gave him complete control over British intelligence. So the man was in charge of both British intelligence and the civil service. He was the most powerful man in Britain.
Who nobody ever heard of over here anyway.
That nobody knows of. And yet all of the stuff that's coming out against Brexit comes out of the civil service and comes out of intelligence, the intelligence system. And Sedwill himself has deep ties to MI6. Okay. So the Skripal affair, he was in charge of that. MH17, he was in charge of that. Okay. This is all known, right? So Sedwill being removed on June 28th, 2 days before the Brexit extension expires, the opportunity for Britain to apply for an extension to the transition period to as part of the withdrawal agreement to negotiate a free trade deal, which the EU was desperate to get because they are trying to. Their gig is all. If we can't win now, we'll win 2 years from now. We'll just run the clock out on you. We'll change the rules again, and then we'll change it again, and we'll see if we can get leverage. And that's all they're playing for. They just keep playing for that moment where they can finally get leverage over the Brits. They've had no leverage in these Brexit discussions at any point. All they've had is a series of traitors trying to undermine Brexit in the mind of the people. And it didn't work. For 3.5 years, it had 4 years now, it hasn't worked. So Sedwill is now gone after he attempted to scuttle Brexit when Boris Johnson was in the hospital supposedly with COVID. Okay. And Johnson.
That's another thing I didn't know anything about before I heard it from you.
Okay. And I asked these questions to Alexander Mercouris and said, is that correct? Because I read that somewhere and he's like, no, that's absolutely correct. Sedwill tried to file the extension to the withdrawal agreement, to the transition period, while Johnson was in the hospital, and Dominic Cummings had to come back from seclusion to stop it from happening. And then after
that. So was he the acting prime minister at the time?
No, he was just chief cabinet secretary and national security director. And Johnson, when he went into the hospital, refused, this is what Mercouris told me, refused to appoint an assistant prime minister because he didn't trust anybody not to betray the country.
Oh, man.
So then right after Cummings comes back, breaks quarantine, comes back to stop Sedwill from doing this, now he's engulfed in this, oh my God, he broke quarantine thing. That went on for days. And if you remember, that went on for 3 weeks, and they were trying to take down the British government over that, trying to get Cummings to
remember that story, and I thought it was weird. Yeah.
It was really weird. And they kept saying, well, Dominic Cummings was the architect of Brexit, and he's a bad guy, and yada, yada, yada. No, this is all about him not stopping Brexit. About him stopping Brexit. So, because the European Union needs the UK, ultimately, you cannot have anybody move against the UK. The Queen wants the UK sovereign, but she has been a captured piece on the chessboard for decades because Britain's been in the hands of Marxists since the end of World War II. They've been pushing for this their entire time. And Margaret Thatcher was completely betrayed by her cabinet to get them into the EU in the first place. All of this stuff has been going on for decades. The undermining of the royal family and the marginalization of all of it has been going on for decades, all in the service of building the European Union, which is a lifelong goal of these people. It's been their raison d'etre since they've gotten up in the morning since the end of World War II. And you just have to understand that that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with multiple generations of oligarchs who have been building this project for decades. And so two fops like Trump and Boris Johnson are going to stop that? No, of course they have to be hammered out of existence. And what's been part and parcel to all this? And then I haven't even gotten into the Israeli angle yet, but let's just stay on this, right? So they don't want Brexit to happen because they want Britain to stay in the European Union, not necessarily for the money, but to keep them neutralized. Don't have them move and realign with the United States. They want to isolate the United States and then destroy it. Strategically, that's what's going on. You isolate the United States by cutting off Britain, who's now an ally again. Force them into a subservient position back within the EU where they're out, but they have no voice. They're out, they have no voice, but they have to abide by all the rules. Go look at what Michel Barnier, the chief trade negotiator, is offering them. He refuses to budge on anything. Oh, we'll allow you to have control of your fishing waters. Excuse me, they're my fishing waters. We might allow some of your boats in. That's the way but no, these people are unbelievably arrogant. Angela Merkel is dog whistling out the wazoo that Trump's going to be gone in November and you're going to be screwed, Boris, and we're going to force you to accept the bad deal come late November. That's what we're playing for. Well, she may be right about that. And right now she's got the polling numbers to back that up when she was on her way out of office. So if you don't think that COVID-19 wasn't an operation at every freaking level, a political operation at every level, then, flush out your headgear, new guy, because that's what we're dealing with. That's the real story here. And so at the center of this is Maxwell and Epstein and Trump. Trump understands that the way to beat these people is to remove their ability to use leverage over everybody else, because they have erected this through blackmail and leverage of judges, attorneys general, senators, and members of parliament, assistant prime ministers, all of these people all around the world for decades. That's what they've been doing. Now, Whitney Webb would argue that they don't need Epstein and Maxwell anymore, that they can do all this electronically now. They can see into people's houses from space. Well, what do we need, cheap blackmail stuff like Epstein and Maxwell were adept at. Fine. It's a great argument. I just don't think it scans with Trump and Barr's motivations.
Well, even if it's true, Tom, there's still that old material there, right? That has to be dealt with, right, regardless of whether their old techniques are relevant anymore or not. There's still, allegedly a cache of dirt, really bad stuff on a lot of people, right? So that has to be dealt with regardless. Yeah.
So now let's bring in a couple of little known facts. Israel doesn't exist without British influence. Okay. The effect of so much of what we think of as like Jewish influence in the media is really British influence in the media. Like our media here is more actually infiltrated by British intelligence than it is, Israel. And AIPAC. I'm dead serious about this. And so many of the alt-right guys are so wrong about all this stuff. They see the proximate cause. They don't see the real cause. They don't see the real stuff with Helen Gurley Brown and all that stuff going back into the 50s. Like, if I have a real problem with Marxists, as you well know. And on my scale of who I think are the worst Marxists, British Marxists are the worst because they've been the ones with the most connections, because they have
and if they're oligarchs and Marxism they don't mix, right? So they're not really they don't really want Marxism themselves. Yeah. They want a system. They want to exactly.
Want to everybody else. But some of them are true believers. and they exported it around the world as a tactic and as a strategy to undermine other countries and to get and use it to get control of other countries. And we're seeing the downstream effects of this today on the streets of the United States in places like Minneapolis and Atlanta, and tearing down statues and all of this stuff. And I think they've unleashed something they can't control, but that's off topic. Getting back to Maxwell and Epstein, we know that Robert Maxwell, her father, had deep ties to the Mossad and to British intelligence. We know that she probably does as well. Okay, so if there's a motivation here that puts Ghislaine Maxwell on the side of Trump and Barr, it's this: if she's loyal to both Israel and the Brits, which I think she is in some way, okay, or at least that's her best chance of surviving this, is to align herself with the faction that can actually have her back or is in a position of ascendancy. Then the Brits, the Israelis, and the United States form a very powerful alliance. And she has dirt on all of their enemies, right? So who's fighting to get her? Who's making this whole thing out to be about Prince Andrew and pedophilia? The mainstream media, Audrey Strauss, Jeffrey Berman. These are all people that work for the Southern District of New York. These are all people that work for effectively the same people who have been trying to run the world and erect the 1984 via the European Union, or what I like to call the EU-SSR. For decades, right? I mean, it literally is. I mean, the structure of the EU is actually more efficient and a better version of the USSR than the USSR was. Like, those guys are tourists compared to these people. I'm dead serious. So because they understand that you have to destroy sovereignty and then push it in and push it out legally around the world while creating like a neo-feudal state for everybody else, because that's what they're trying to do. So if I'm Ghislaine Maxwell and I'm looking at all of this, and they killed Epstein, and I still have all of my stuff, and Trump and Barr are actually trying to stop this from occurring, then I stay in New Hampshire, and Trump and Barr know where she is, and they've just been putting out disinformation about her whereabouts for months, because for months she was supposed to be in Paris, right?
All different places, yeah.
But mostly Paris and around France, because she couldn't be extradited from France for the same reasons that Roman Polanski can't be extradited from France, because he was born in France and France won't extradite any French national if they don't want to. Period. Like, that's one of the perks of being French. It's like having a house in Florida. The IRS can't take my home because it's homestead exempted. It's the same thing, right? It's ironclad. And so that was maybe that was a convenient cover story. Maybe that was convenient misinformation, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter. It's spycraft at this point. We can speculate to our heart's content. But the way all the incentives line up here is for her to turn all that information over to Donald Trump, because Berman was sitting on all the information gleaned in the Epstein raid. As you pointed out in the opening, that the raid happened slowly. It didn't happen, it didn't, all of his properties that weren't raided all at once, of course, so that people could burn as much stuff as possible, and all of that stuff. So Berman was sitting on all of that. Berman was also locking all of that away in conjunction with the Virginia Giuffre's case against Prince Andrew, right? Like, that's all evidence that he can sit on and no one else can have. Now, if you open up the Maxwell indictment when she's arrested, now all that information all that evidence can be used in both cases, and now they can get access to it again. So you bring Maxwell in at the right moment in time, and I think the timing on this is very important, because it's about Brexit. Too. Because it's about Brexit. Because if they can keep, because they've been going after Boris Johnson almost as hard as they've been going after Trump. I mean, it's been vicious what's been happening with Johnson. I've been watching the polls in Britain very carefully, and they've got, Johnson's approval rating down into the low 40s or mid 40s, down from the high 50s. And they've got Labor back up at the 35% range, right? As the minor parties all fall off, and now it's going to, they're hoping that they can get a vote of no confidence against Johnson, or just finally just outright kill him. They've already tried twice and failed.
Is
So
that public information or no?
what about him getting killed twice?
Attempts to kill him.
But
Yeah.
you got COVID. Him getting
Uh-huh.
COVID one, and then there was the auto accident he was in recently, where some protester came running through and caused an accident. And I'm sure that if I watched the tape on that, it was very clearly a ham-fisted attempt to get Johnson into some kind of compromising position or whatever. I to me that just seemed like that screamed like failed hit to me, and meant to look like something innocuous. And I don't think that I don't think he's out of the woods yet. And by any stretch of the imagination, not until January 1st, 2021, when they're officially out with no deal.
So Maxwell being in New Hampshire, I remember thinking, well, either someone had to have been protecting her and these materials,
Sure.
whatever material she has, supposedly has, but she can also just be saying that to protect herself.
Sure.
Because it looks like she's going to cooperate with somebody. When Berman and Barr had their falling out, a very public falling out, Barr supposedly was trying to bring in someone temporarily. He wanted to bring in the U.S. attorney in New Jersey, who apparently, I guess, Trump trusts him, Barr and Trump.
Yeah, because that
trust
guy
him, assuming that Barr and Trump are working together, and it does look that way. Although motives are not really to Trump, right? He has sort of deeper motives. So when they had their public falling out, it wasn't about what it was about.
Right.
When Ghislaine Maxwell, now there was a grand jury too, apparently, came up with these charges. So Barr wanted to bring in the U.S. attorney from New Jersey, but ultimately he wanted to bring somebody else in to run the SDNY. We had the, James Comey's op-ed about, the norms and the traditions and all this stuff, how it had to be an alum from SDM, all that stuff. Right. And I guess Berman put up a real fight and insisted, and then he backed down when Barr backed down and said, okay, we'll put Berman's deputy. So basically, Berman still has control over that case. He's still got control over that case. He was running a grand jury, and I guess what was his plan? Did he intend to bring much lesser charges? Did he intend to just drag it out and do nothing with the charges until Trump's out of office? Or, what do you have any idea of what's your best guess?
My best guess here is
they disagree.
My best guess here is that Berman was slow rolling any investigation vis-a-vis Epstein, making it all about Prince Andrew. Right. And at the same time, Berman was also heavily going after Donald Trump personally. And there was for no reason. He was trying to get Trump's tax returns, and all that stuff, right? Which I think is a massive MacGuffin, a massive red herring. Eventually, Trump will give them his tax returns, and we'll find out that there's nothing there. And even if there is some petty stuff, what are you going to do about it? He's trying to get that into the second term, which is fine. I think the goal here is that they wanted to get somebody and the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York who was under their control. Period. Has nothing to do with. It's not any deeper than that. The SDNY exists to protect the very powerful. That's where all of these cases go through. It's where all the banks are prosecuted or not prosecuted, as the case may be. It's just, I remember saying before Trump even took power, I think I wrote it in the newsletter I was writing for Newsmax at the time. I said, if Trump goes after the Southern District of New York, he is the real deal, because that is where all the corruption starts. That's where it's all protected. Okay, that's why none of the banks were prosecuted after Lehman Brothers. That's why Occupy Wall Street exists. That's why we're downstream of all that. Now that's being used to throw an insurrection against Trump, who's trying to open up the corruption within the court system. Like Berman shouldn't even have Berman shouldn't even have the job. Trump fires Preet Bharara in 2018. and the Senate refuses to confirm anybody. And so a judicial panel appoints Berman, and eventually Trump says, okay, you can have him, because you got to put somebody in there. But Berman was picked by Schumer to go back into that role and sit on Anthony Weiner's laptop and all of that. And so Trump then goes after them again in 2019 by going after Epstein. And now that puts them on their back foot again, and they got to scramble. And now they're going to try and turn that into something different, and trying to turn that into, okay, well, we'll turn it into we'll focus only on the pedophilia case and Prince Andrew. Because it's always about that. They always turn it into the most lurid thing to get the normies to focus on that, while the real crimes go undiscussed. That's like strategy 101 for this stuff. I mean, this is the way this stuff works. And so, and we can get a member of the royal family, and we can bring that, and then we can use that to maybe undermine Boris Johnson a little bit more, maybe, and then somehow use that and then just run out the clock while they attack Trump at every level to get him out of office, because they know that if he gets reelected, they will not have any kind of power to stop him from doing exactly what he wants to do. And don't forget, I don't consider Donald Trump a white knight or anything like that. I think he's our demon. Like, have you ever seen the movie Pitch Black?
No.
Chronicles Riddick. It's all about the bad guy. Like, we have to let the bad guy, the murderer, defend us, because there's something out there worse than him. That's who Trump is. Trump is a bad guy. He's a gangster. He was trained by Roy Cohn. Audrey Strauss, who's Berman's replacement, was part of the prosecutorial team that put Roy Cohn in jail. Like, she was handpicked by Berman to come out of retirement to be his assistant. Why? Because they wanted to make sure they had an insurance plan. But then again, is Strauss really that level of insurance? I don't know. Is her discuss circuit, more highly developed than Berman's? She's a woman. She could be.
The thing about SDNY, though, when you say Trump went after Epstein, but SDNY, also known as the Sovereign District of New York, they're the one who brought that case. They're the ones who brought this case. And he doesn't have any control over them. Barr has little control over them, apparently. Yes. However, we don't know what they are threatening in the background. I mean, I guess it's possible.
I think
that another district that Trump does have control over could do something. Sure. So what?
But I think you got to remember that that Epstein wasn't in New York when he was arrested. He was in New Jersey. So it's just like Maxwell. The indictment was filed in New York. So they can go grab Epstein. The FBI can grab Epstein wherever he is, and Barr has control over the FBI. But then the prisoner, well, I mean, nominally, right? Nominally, he has control over the FBI. He can. I think the attorney general can get a bunch of FBI agents to show up and issue a warrant and go get any guy that he wants them to get. He might not be able to pull any FBI agent and say and grab any random FBI agent, but he knows the ones he can go grab to go do the raid on Epstein's house. Correct? So, but the indictment and all the cases against Epstein were filed in the Southern District of New York on purpose, so that if it ever got to that point, they would be remanded to the U.S. attorney who they control, and the prosecutors they control, and the judges they control. That's what you gotta. That's where all this has to be kind of separated out. Berman was given all of was able to take control of all the materials, right? It's like, moreover, don't ever discount somebody just wanting to make a splash for themselves. I mean, never forget. Yeah. I mean, never forget that. You got a district attorney who's looking to make the jump to senator or, House rep or whatever, and it's just that happens, and stuff breaks containment. You talk about factions, then there's always just the random guy who's just power hungry, right? And then it can't always be explained by rationally going down the rabbit hole. Well, if this, then that. Things just happen, and they put people in place to firewall things when somebody acts in a way that they're not supposed to. And that guy could have been, I firmly believe that it's Donald Trump. I firmly believe Trump wants to put Hillary Clinton in jail. I think this is a grudge. I think that, remember, he testified off the record. It's in sealed documents, or from what I understand, that he testified against Epstein. Like, he threw him out of Mar-a-Lago.
You're talking about now back in 2008 time period.
Right. I'm talking about
I know he cooperated. He definitely cooperated with the police.
Yes.
And it was the police, the Palm Beach police, who called in the FBI, who weren't satisfied with what the state prosecutor had done. Yeah.
Right. And Trump was a party to that on the downside. I think Donald Trump is a flawed man. I think he's a man with a lot of I mean, he's a very flawed man. But I don't doubt his revulsion over trafficking 15 and 16-year-old girls. I just don't. Like, that to me scans. The guy's a cheesy New York State real estate developer, right? He likes to play golf. Schmooze, got a bit, make a deal, yada, yada, yada. I think something happened in the last 10 years that made him go, someone needs to step up and do something here. And if no one else is going to do it, I'll do it. And
he would have seen the dark underbelly. I mean, he certainly would have seen it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, but I guess the other thing is, though,
if it was anybody
and
else,
I buy that the Brexit is part of it, but the 2020 election, the one crisis after another, boom, one after another. It's Russiagate, boom. It's the
Ukraine, the impeachment,
pandemic, Ukraine impeachment, and then boom, they even overlap each other. Then it's the pandemic.
Yep.
So, well, we're coming up to the time of the conventions, right? And there's talk about someone wanting someone else to run, forcing Trump to drop out. There's also, and this is my own personal thing, I am still not convinced that Biden is going to be the candidate. So I guess I'm more convinced now than I was in the beginning. I'm shocked that they could pull this off, but I really thought that they were going to bring somebody else in at the convention. Sure. This would be someone who refused to run in the primaries, wanted to be coronated, or someone who couldn't win the primary. I thought it was going to be Hillary Clinton was going to walk in and get, there'd be some crisis that would require a new candidate, and it would be Hillary. So the Epstein case cropping up again would be also a way to convince the Clintons that they better back down, they better bail out. And notably, the charges, and Whitney Webb noted this, that they only cover things that happened in the mid-1990s.
Yep.
And all the Clinton involvement, at least what's been made public, the flights on the Lolita Express and all that was in the 2000s. So they're not even touching the time period when it's going to hit a lot of other very, very powerful people, which I thought was interesting. That's convenient for the Clintons, or it could be a threat. And we have Gloria Allred, anyway, she just basically went out there and gave a public statement where she talked about how Maxwell could cooperate. And, I don't know if that was wishful thinking on her part, or whether she was broadcasting a threat, whether this could be, like a lot of other things, just like hanging on to detaining somebody to try to get them to say what you want them to say, to implicate someone else. Or in this case, just to make someone fearful enough to do what they want them to do. What they want them to do right now, I mean, it could be Brexit related. It could be trying to get Trump to drop out and let Romney step in. I can't believe that there's not a 2020 election thing. When you mentioned timing, the time.
No, absolutely there is. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's all about Brexit. I think that getting rid of Trump is partially about Brexit.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Okay, because without Donald Trump backing Boris Johnson's play, Johnson has no leverage in talks with the European Union. Joe Biden wins on the second Tuesday in November. On Wednesday, he calls Angela Merkel, or Obama calls Angela Merkel, and says, there won't be any trade deal with the United States. And it's over. and then they have to fold. Look, that's what's going on here. That's the big thing. Okay, it's all about this. Like, that's why the European Union continues to do their Swedish national anthem thing, which is that every time, you walk in to try and negotiate it with them, you lay out your terms, and then they look at you when you're finished like you just sung the Swedish national anthem, and then they go back talking amongst themselves and say, oh, no, we're going to do things this way. Because they don't listen. They don't care. Because they think they have all the leverage in the world. But they don't actually have any leverage here. But they continue to manufacture leverage through all of these other things. Well, because Johnson is strong because Trump is in office, backing his play. If Trump wins re-election, Brexit occurs. The European Union folds. When the European Union folds on the UK, it emboldens everybody else to stand up. They've been beaten. Okay? And the Brits are free. And then the minute it looks like they're succeeding without the European Union starts to collapse. If Trump wins re-election and he's got Ghislaine Maxwell in his back pocket, all of a sudden, all of these people who are used to as enforcers of the status quo that's existed, all of a sudden they're all going to start retiring. Chuck Schumer will retire. Nancy Pelosi will retire. Dianne Feinstein will all of a sudden retire. Like, all of these people who are currently either Chinese agents. I mean, the woman's driver worked for China for 20 years and gave away state secrets. Woman's a traitor. This is not even like this. It shouldn't even be a discussion. And yet she's still a prominent member of Congress, right? Prominent member of the Senate.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think people work with the Chinese state. I think the Chinese state has a bunch of oligarchs who have partnerships with people over here. So I don't know if it's quite that cut and dry.
Fair enough, but it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, like, the Clintons are guilty of the same thing, giving away state secrets to the Chinese in ways that they shouldn't be doing. I mean, all of this stuff. And it's been going on for decades, and they're all scared to death of it. And they all still want to believe that they can have their moment in the sun and their more perfect union, and their transnational oligarchy. And don't forget, Google, Facebook, Twitter, they're all in on this too. Like, all the same people are all on the boards of all these companies. Netflix, Soros is on the board of both Netflix and Twitter. Okay? He's openly gone after Facebook because, Facebook somewhat gives Trump a fair hearing and allows him, takes advertising from him. Why? Because Facebook is actually nominally run by Wall Street and Goldman Sachs and the book runners for the IPO, by the way. And, like, if Trump wins re-election in the fall, Facebook will be exempted from any bad things happening. He's going to go after Google. Like, they're all pot committed to this in a way that is scary and spooky. Time Warner is going to get broken up over CNN. Trump's going to go after all of these people. You're talking about one of the most vindictive, narcissistic people on the planet.
Yeah,
fear sure. in with no fear of re-election coming down the pike. You don't think that they're not scared of Donald Trump unleashed in the second term? Not because he's competent, but because he's nasty.
Yeah, I do think that they fear that a lot.
And I don't think
it's shocking that the people who went after him are still in such good shape. I mean, nominally anyway. They wrecked their reputations in some cases. But you know what I wanted to ask you? The City of London and Wall Street. So I guess there's factions within those too. But in general, City of London, are they going to align with the British royalty?
They've been resisting it the entire time, obviously, and that's been one of the biggest problems because of obviously Sedwill and Theresa May represented them, but they'll do whatever they have to do, right?
They did. Okay.
Theresa May's husband is a prominent City of London banker. Like, it's all internecine. It's all terrible, right? So Sedwill and May were at the core of that. City of London will try to stay out of it as much as possible, but at the same time, they're all cutting deals with China on the back end of it, right? And Trump is going after China as well at the same time. But it's I don't know. I mean, at this point, they're going to go wherever capital is going to treat it best, and that may be completely, and that's going to be different in 10 years. Trump may win this fight, okay, and but at the same time, he's losing the wider geopolitical war, which is what I was writing about right before you called this afternoon.
Yeah,
About
Eurasia. I mean,
we're talking about the Iran-China deal that Simon Watkins over at Oil Price reported on the other day. It was on Zero Hedge last night, and this is a massive deal that, in terms of, I mean, the important part here is that Hong Kong is changing, China is going to change, the Russian, Iranian, Chinese axis is forming a stronger coalition than it ever did before, and they all have Donald Trump to thank for it by being, by running around like a bull in a china shop, trying to, make the dollar, trying to use dollar diplomacy as opposed to troops to, win bigly, while they all walk away and say, well, fine, we'll just use our own currencies now, and we'll build our own parallel systems, which is what they've been doing. And now they're ready to, and over the course of the next 10 years, the Chinese are just going to start laughing at us. And with good reason.
Sanctions or
between the sanctions on Nord Stream 2, between the sanctions on Iran, all of this stuff. So he's losing. So he's trying to save the United States. And, honestly, he should just focus on winning against the deep state here and give up trying to control Central Asia. And I think he's finally realized that. But I also think that he's willing to make a couple of deals, right, that secure Israel's future by securing Britain's future. Because look, Israel doesn't want to be left to the European Union. It was under the European Union and the Obama crowd, when they were in charge, right, that created the JCPOA. Britain was a captured pawn. The Israelis are looking at the situation going, okay, so how do we survive this when the EU is actually hostile to us, right? I'm not taking Israel's side here. I'm just explaining their position, right? I'm no fan of any of these people. I don't like the Brits. I don't like the European Union. I don't like the Chinese. I barely like the Russians. I'm not crazy about us. I don't like the Israelis. I don't like the Iranians either. I think they're all terrible. I'm an anarchist. I don't like any of these people. But when you stop to like put it on, look at it from Israel's perspective, you say, okay, where do I place my bet? Well, Trump has been willing to give us everything we want, so we wanted him to stay in power, because the last thing we want is Obama to be in charge of the White House again. Because if Biden wins, it's Obama's third term. Okay.
Yeah.
Until
agree with that.
Until Biden abdicates for health reasons, and then his running mate, and they're going to try and meme Susan Rice into being. I think Hillary's going to try and pull shenanigans at the convention, and if she does, Trump wins in a walk, because it's a replay of 2016 and everybody hates Hillary. But that's the 2-sentence version of that can go on. That's a 20-minute discussion in and of itself. But look at it from Israel's perspective and say, okay, so what's our best plan for survival? Because Iran just made a major deal with China, and Russia is ascendant in Syria. And if Trump is gone, then what happens with Turkey and that whole region? We're screwed. Okay? Everything goes backwards, and now Netanyahu has to deal with Putin and not be able to go and grab his big brother Trump and go throw people at Iran and whatnot. Remember also that this deal with China completely undercuts Saudi Arabia. They just signed Saudi Arabia's death warrant. The death certificate. It's done, because part of that deal is that the Chinese are going to be able to buy unlimited amounts of oil and gas from Iran for like 6 to 12% under the market. Like, done. That's it. They're finished. So, it's crazy. So that's happening. If I'm Israel, I'm putting my money behind Trump. And if my best asset, Ghislaine Maxwell, has to be sacrificed for that, Trump makes the deal. It's very simple. We'll give you the West Bank. We'll throw the Palestinians overboard. We'll turn the other way while you send F-35s into west of Tehran or east of Tehran to blow up supposedly a nuclear facility, which is what happened last week. And you give us Maxwell, and we'll keep you out of it. And we're going to go after these people, these people, and these people, and these people. I can see that. To me, that all makes perfect sense to me. The Mossad cuts Maxwell loose and says, make a deal with Trump. We're going at you're going to bring down. You're not going to bring down Prince Andrew, because she's already stated flat out in an article in the Telegraph in December through her people. It was made explicitly clear that she's like, Prince Andrew. I can prove that Prince Andrew is not guilty of any of these charges, and I will defend him on this. She's going to throw the Clintons under the bus. That's what this is about. And that's what Trump is motivated by, because Trump won the election when he told everybody he put Hillary in jail. Promises made, promises kept. I'm telling you, he's going after Hillary before this thing is over. And I think, at a certain level, that Hillary is the odd person out here, because Obama hates her. He hates her guts. Okay. The DNC, that her faction within the DNC is still somewhat loyal to her. The DNC is split three ways between the Obama faction, the Clinton faction, and the Squad, or the Cenk Uygur, whatever, the George Soros insurrection. Right? You've got all that happening within the DNC. None of that makes any sense. If not for the billions in in-kind contributions from the media and all of these BLM and the rest of it, that Biden can't raise any money. Biden's not raising any money. This is all happening through in-kind contributions. That's crazy. So I think that's what this is about. And I think that he may be trying to force the Clintons back into the spotlight by trying to take over the DNC at the convention, so that she's just delusional enough to think that, well, okay, if I'm president, I can't be prosecuted.
Yeah, that's interesting. I thought that the Clintons and Obama had come to some kind of a truce on Super Tuesday, when and maybe Hillary gets to pick the vice president or something. I don't know. I still hold out that she may be trying to step in there herself. But yeah, I hadn't thought of the Epstein thing in terms of an Obama versus Clinton thing. I guess that is, it could be meant to scare the Clintons, but I don't think Trump's ever going to put Hillary in jail. I really don't. But I can see how he might try to do something to harm her, for sure.
I mean,
especially
it may take until the second term to get that done. He's going to go after her in the second term. He absolutely is. He is
a retaliation kind of guy. That's for sure. But if it's gonna hurt him, he's gonna back down. He's also not, suicidal.
Well, I'll tell you this. At this point, he has nothing to lose, because if he loses this election, they're going to strip him of all of his assets.
I think they're going to
destroy his family. Yeah, they're going to destroy his family. They're going to destroy his kids. They're going to destroy him. They're going to destroy everything about him. He's got nothing left to lose. So when a man has nothing left to lose, he's never more dangerous, which is, by the way, why the deep state / Davos crowd is also dangerous, because they have everything to lose here as well. This is an existential fight for the future of the United States and for the future of the world. And I'm dead serious when I say that. When you look at the motivations of all of these very powerful people, it is very clear what's happening here. And there's very little way for me to see it any other way once you see it in these terms. You're talking about the British royal family, the President of the United States, or the European Union. Like, these are some of the most powerful people in the world, and the people who stand behind them and the people who stand behind them, right? The people who think they run the world. They don't run the world because they're too incompetent to run the world. They think
that's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But they think they run the world, and they have just enough power to set things in motion to make it look like they run the world, which is why
I agree with that.
Which is why I always caution people about, well, this guy worked for that guy 35 years ago, so that relationship must still exist. No, it doesn't. Like, I don't buy any of this stuff about Bill Barr's father and William Barr's father and Jeffrey Epstein. I don't buy any of it. I just don't. Yeah, he gave the guy his first job. Jeffrey Epstein acted for 40 years on his own after that. And who knows what went on and what alliances and relationships he made. Did he get a start that way? Fine. Does that mean that William Barr is going to protect Epstein to protect his dad? We already hear knows all about that. So it may be nothing more than that. Now, a guy like Bill Browder, on the other hand, because his dad was the head of the Communist Party, that guy, I believe, is British intelligence and a British Marxist, or American Marxist. Absolutely believe that. Like, that goes without saying. That guy's a liar and a thief and all sorts of things, and an intelligence asset.
Yeah, some of the dots that people connect, they're interesting details, but not strong. They're just not strong enough to,
right.
And so many of them are so many decades ago, and so much has happened in those decades. I think we have to be careful about that. That seems like a good place to wrap it, Tom.
Sure. Sounds good to me.
And so I do have a bonus question for you.
Sure.
This would be just for patrons.
Okay.
And basically, it's really, we had talked about this a long time ago and had intended to do a podcast on it. So that's why I try to squeeze in here. We're going to completely shift gears on you guys. Tom is, very much into geopolitics and strategies, though he's not a disclaimer. But I'm just wondering, is crypto a good strategic investment? And for people who have not gotten into it yet, real latecomers, I would say, like, what's the best way to get started with it?
Okay.
And that is going to be for patrons. And so I'll just let you answer that now, Tom.
The answer to the bonus question is in an extra bonus segment for patrons. That's mostly unrelated to the main interview episode, but something I thought might be interesting for people who have been considering putting some assets into cryptocurrency or other alternative investments like gold, but who haven't gotten around to it or never felt the need to until now, when some period of instability looks pretty likely. So you can find that at patreon.com/aroundtheempire or at aroundtheempire.com. It's episode 174 bonus, Getting Started with Bitcoin and Gold. So I'm not great at marketing, definitely not my forte, but I'm starting to provide more bonus material for patrons, which is necessary for independent media like this funded solely by listeners. And because I appreciate them and they make it possible, pay the overhead costs of the show, compensate a little bit for the labor that goes into it. So that's my tease. I hope that some of you will subscribe to this podcast on Patreon to get these kinds of extras. There are also full episodes for patrons only. This month there'll be a new Discord channel, hopefully some live streams soon for patrons only where we can discuss things among ourselves. And now I'll continue with the interview wrap-up.
Okay, well, let's wrap up. Tom, please tell us where to find you, how to support your work, and anything else that you want to plug before we end.
Well, you can find my work over tomluongo.me, which is my blog, Gold, Goats, and Guns. You can support my work over at Patreon.com/Gold, Goats, and Guns, or you can just search Tom Luongo or Gold, Goats, and Guns on Patreon. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. I do live streams on YouTube and DLive.tv every Monday night at 8 p.m. and Friday night at 8:30. Warning, I'm a bad boy. I got a potty mouth. I use those words in sentences. And the last thing to say is that, on Patreon, my patrons get both twice weekly private podcasts, which are both a mix of weekly commentary on the state of geopolitics and the news, and technical analysis of very important markets like Bitcoin, like gold, like oil, like the Dow, the euro, the dollar, whatever strikes my fancy. This morning I did a commentary on the Hong Kong dollar peg. So, and I've got, we do that every Wednesday and Sunday. And then I do a monthly investment newsletter where I give out stock advice and a portfolio strategy, and both of those things are described on the Patreon page. So you can decide on that as well.
So all those things you can get through the Patreon, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks again, Tom. Great talking with you. And let's do it again soon.
Absolutely, Joanne. Thank you very much. You have a great afternoon.
Thank you for listening. Special thanks to Tom Luongo. Follow Tom on Twitter at TFL1728. Find his work at Gold, Goats, and Guns. Also find his work at Patreon, YouTube, and DLive. Around the Empire podcast, independent media. Your support's really important. Please pitch in patreon.com/aroundtheempire or paypal.me/aroundtheempirepod. Audio podcast, you can find it and listen to it many different ways. On the website, aroundtheempire.com, on any mobile podcast app, on Patreon, or on YouTube. And if you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Follow on Twitter at aroundtheempire, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.